I grew bell peppers for the first 8 years of my gardening life and consistently got disappointing results. Small fruit, thin walls, plants that snapped in summer storms, sun squall destroying half the crop by July. I was following every piece of advice I had ever read. None of it was exactly wrong, but critical pieces were missing. Things nobody mentioned because they assumed you already knew them, or because they had never grown peppers long enough to discover them themselves. It took me the better part of a decade and more failed pepper seasons than I want to admit before my results changed permanently. What I'm giving you today is what took me 10 years to figure out on my own. Two things I want to flag before we start. First, there is something I do to every pepper plant that most gardening advice gets completely wrong. It involves topping, and the standard advice on when to do it, when not to do it, and which plants to do it to is the reason most gardeners either damage their plants or miss the window entirely. I am covering that first. Second, I discovered something about overwintering pepper plants about 12 years ago that changed how I garden permanently. I have not started a pepper plant from seed since. I will explain that at the very end of this video. Stay for it. One more thing. July is when most of these decisions are already affecting your harvest. Some of them can still be fixed right now. A few cannot. I will be clear about which is which as we go through them. Topping. I topped my pepper plants for 3 seasons because everything I read said it increased branching and yield. My results were inconsistent. Some plants responded reasonably well. Most did not show the improvement I expected. It took me 3 seasons and a fair amount of frustration before I understood why. Topping means cutting off the growing tip of the main stem. The theory is correct. Removing the tip forces the plant to branch aggressively below the cut. More branches means more fruiting sites. More fruiting sites means higher yield. That logic is sound. What most advice leaves out are the 2 factors that determine whether it actually works in your garden: variety and season length. For large pepper varieties, bell peppers, Anaheim, poblano, topping in a short growing season removes weeks of productive growth the plant cannot recover before first frost. The branching happens. The new branches are real. But in zones 3 through 6, those new branches do not mature enough to produce full-sized fruit before the season ends. I was in zone 5. I topped large bell pepper plants believing I was helping them. I was shortening my productive season on plants that already had limited time. For small pepper varieties, shishito, pequin, Thai peppers, topping works well. These varieties branch quickly and the smaller fruit matures fast on new growth. The timing matters as much as the variety. Top only when the plant is young, under 12 inches, and only if your season is long enough for new branches to mature and produce fruit before frost. A large pepper plant topped in July in zone 5 or 6 is almost certainly going to produce nothing from those new branches before the season ends. I was wrong about this for a long time. What I do now for most of my pepper plants is simpler. I remove all leaves touching the soil surface, nothing more. This reduces disease pressure at the base of the plant without removing any productive growth. It took me 3 failed topping seasons to land on that. Now let me tell you about the season I lost 14 pepper plants in a single afternoon. I had been growing peppers for 4 seasons at that point. My plants looked stable going into July. I had not staked any of them because nothing had happened to suggest they needed it. A summer storm came through in the afternoon, not a severe storm. Wind and rain for about 40 minutes. 14 plants snapped at the stem, all of them loaded with developing fruit, all of them gone in one afternoon. I never made that mistake again. Bell peppers loaded with developing fruit are top-heavy in ways that are not obvious until the weight is already there. The stem-to-fruit weight ratio shifts dramatically from June to July as the fruit develops. A plant that seemed completely stable in June can be genuinely at risk in July. I stake every pepper plant at transplant now, not when it looks like it needs staking. By the time a plant looks like it needs support, the weight is already stressing the stem tissue and the root anchorage. I use bamboo stakes and soft natural twine, not wire, not plastic clips that can cut into expanding stem tissue as the plant grows. Soft twine tied loosely, enough to guide the plant without constricting it. I leave slack in every tie. The tie point matters too. I tie below a branch junction, never at the junction itself. A junction is a pressure point during wind movement. Tying at a junction concentrates stress exactly where the plant is most vulnerable to snapping. For compact, bushy varieties, I use pepper cages. For tall, indeterminate types, I do not use cages because by midsummer the cage is inadequate and the plant has grown through it. Removing the plant from a cage at season end without damaging the root system is difficult and often unnecessary damage. Stake them, soft twine, at transplant. That is the rule I have followed since I lost those 14 plants. Number 3 is something I get asked about constantly, whether hot peppers and sweet peppers can grow near each other. The short answer is yes. With one important qualification about seeds. I grew hot and sweet peppers in the same bed for years out of necessity before I fully understood the cross-pollination question. Hot and sweet peppers can grow side by side without affecting the flavor of this season's fruit. The fruit on the plant this year reflects only the genetics of that plant. Cross-pollination affects the seeds inside the fruit, which means it matters only if you save those seeds and grow plants from them next year. I grow jalapenos 12 inches from my bell peppers every season. My bell peppers taste exactly like bell peppers. My jalapenos taste exactly like jalapenos. They have done this for over 20 years in the same bed. The only situation where proximity becomes genuinely relevant is seed saving. A bell pepper seed that was cross-pollinated by a nearby hot pepper may produce a plant with unexpected heat the following year. If you buy new seeds every year, this is completely irrelevant to you. I save seeds. I keep my seed-saving plants at least 30 feet from any other pepper variety. My production plants I grow wherever space allows. Number 4 is sunscald. I want to describe exactly what it looks like because I see gardeners misdiagnose this constantly as disease when the cause and the fix are completely different. I spent 2 full seasons treating sunscald as a fungal problem before I understood what was actually happening to my peppers. Sunscald appears as dry, pale brown or white patches on the side of the pepper facing afternoon sun. The tissue under the patch is papery and slightly collapsed. It can look like blight, it can look like bacterial spot. It is neither. It is physical damage from ultraviolet radiation, concentrated on exposed fruit surface during peak afternoon heat. Peppers grown in full sun with no canopy. Protection are vulnerable. A pepper fruit hanging in open air on the south or west side of the plant, with no leaf cover above it, is directly exposed to the most intense UV radiation of the day. I use 3 fixes depending on the situation. First, I plant my bell peppers at 14 inches apart, rather than the 18 to 24 inches most advice recommends. The canopy of adjacent plants closes over, fruit is shaded by surrounding foliage, and sun-scald becomes rare. Closer spacing creates natural protection. Second, I plant sunflowers on the west side of my pepper bed in late May. By July, the sunflowers are tall enough to provide afternoon shade when the peppers need it most. I have used this combination for 15 years. It works consistently, and the sunflowers are useful for other reasons as well. Third, during heat waves above 95 degrees, I install 30 to 50% shade cloth over the bed from noon to 4 in the afternoon. I keep a roll of it specifically for this purpose. That was a purchase I resisted for years and then could not believe I had waited so long to make. Number 5 is watering. And I want to correct something repeated in almost every pepper growing guide that leads to the most common preventable mistake I see in home pepper gardens. I watered my peppers on the same schedule as my tomatoes for years. I had consistent problems I could not diagnose correctly until I understood the difference in how these two plants actually use water. Peppers need significantly less water than tomatoes. A tomato plant in July in full production may need deep watering twice a week. A pepper plant in the same conditions may need deep watering once a week or less, depending on soil and mulch. Here is the specific mistake I see most often. Gardeners see drooping pepper plants in afternoon heat and immediately water. Drooping in afternoon heat above 90 degrees is often a heat response, not a drought signal. The plant temporarily closes its stomata and reduces internal water pressure to limit moisture loss during peak temperature. It is a survival mechanism, not a distress call. A plant that droops at 2 in the afternoon and recovers on its own by 7 in the evening without any additional water was heat wilting, not drought wilting. Watering a plant that is heat wilting adds water to soil that may already be adequately moist, which leads to root oxygen deprivation. Roots that cannot breathe do not absorb nutrients efficiently. I check soil moisture at 6 inches before watering, regardless of what the plant looks like above the surface. Dry at 6 inches, I water deeply and slowly. Moist at 6 inches, I wait regardless of how the plant looks in the afternoon heat. I use drip irrigation at the base of each plant, not overhead watering. Overhead watering on pepper foliage in afternoon heat increases disease pressure and can create water droplets that concentrate UV radiation on fruit surface and contribute to the sun scald I described earlier. Deep and infrequent over shallow and frequent. Every time. The straw mulch I apply around each plant at transplant reduces evaporation enough that I water my peppers roughly half as often as my tomatoes growing in the same bed. Number 6 is fertilizing. My approach is simpler than most advice you will read, and I want to explain why I simplified it. I stopped using high nitrogen fertilizer on my peppers entirely about 15 years ago. Peppers in the flowering and fruiting phase need potassium and phosphorus, not nitrogen. Nitrogen drives vegetative growth. A pepper plant receiving high nitrogen during flowering produces excessive foliage at the expense of fruit development. The plant looks magnificent. The harvest disappoints. I made this mistake for years. Beautiful plants, underwhelming harvests. I now use a low nitrogen fertilizer, something in the range of 4:9:3 or similar ratios, applied once a month when flowers first begin forming, not before, not during the vegetative establishment phase. Once flowers appear, the plant has switched phases, and the fertilizer needs to match what the plant is actually doing. If the soil is already rich in organic matter from years of compost amendment, my soil usually is, I skip fertilizer entirely some seasons and see no meaningful difference in yield. The soil provides. The fertilizer is supplemental, not essential in well-amended ground. What I never do is apply fertilizer during a heat wave above 95 degrees. Fertilizer application stresses root tissue. Roots already under heat stress are more vulnerable to burn from any fertilizer contact. I wait for the temperature to drop before any application during July heat. Before this video ends, I'm going to tell you the one thing I do that means I have not started a pepper plant from seed in 12 years. That is coming after I cover harvesting. Stay for it. Number 7 is harvesting, and this is where most gardeners leave significant yield on the table through no fault other than not understanding what the pepper is actually telling them. I grew green bell peppers for years before I understood they were simply unripe versions of red, orange, or yellow peppers. Green bell peppers are not a separate variety from red bell peppers in most cases. They are the same pepper harvested before it finishes ripening. Left on the plant, the green pepper turns red or orange or yellow depending on the specific variety, and the flavor changes completely when it does. The sugar content increases significantly. The vitamin C content increases. The pepper wall softens slightly, but the flavor deepens in a way that makes a green bell pepper taste flat by comparison. I leave most of my bell peppers on the plant until they show color. My yield in pounds per season is lower because colored peppers take longer to develop and occupy the plant for more of the season. My satisfaction with the harvest is considerably higher because the flavor difference is not subtle. The trade-off is real, and each gardener makes it based on what they value: quantity of green peppers or quality of colored ones. I made my choice 20 years ago and have not reconsidered it. For jalapenos, I harvest some green for fresh use and leave others too. Turn red. Red jalapenos have significantly more heat and a deeper, richer flavor. Smoked red jalapenos are chipotle peppers, which I make myself from my own plants every fall, a fact that still surprises people who have never made that connection before. Now the last thing, the one I promised to cover at the beginning, the thing that means I have not started a pepper plant from seed in over 12 years. Pepper plants are perennials in their native climate. They are only grown as annuals in zones where frost kills them, but the plant itself does not want to be an annual. Given the chance to survive winter, it will, and a 2 or 3 year old pepper plant produces earlier, larger, and more abundantly than a first-year plant from seed every single time. In my experience, before the first frost, I select my 2 or 3 best performing plants from the season, the most productive ones, the healthiest, the best fruit quality. I cut them back to about 1/3 of their height. I dig them carefully, preserving as much root mass as possible. I pot them in good potting mix and bring them inside to a cool, bright location. A south-facing window works. A simple grow light setup works as well. Through winter, the plants go semi-dormant, minimal water, no fertilizer, just enough light to maintain the root system through the cold months. In spring, 4 to 6 weeks before my last frost date, I begin watering more regularly and move the pots to a warmer, brighter position. They wake up fast. They go back outside after last frost. By the time a seed-started plant is 6 inches tall, my overwintered plants already have flowers forming, often fruit already setting. The first year I did this, I could not believe I had spent 8 years starting peppers from seed when I did not have to. I have not started one from seed since. Here is the summary. Remove only basil leaves rather than topping large varieties in short seasons. Stake at transplant before you think you need to. Grow hot and sweet peppers together freely, but keep seed-saving plants separated. Prevent sun scald through close spacing, companion shade planting, and shade cloth during heat waves. Water based on 6-inch soil moisture, not on plant appearance in afternoon heat. Switch to low nitrogen fertilizer when flowers first appear. Leave peppers on the plant until they show color if flavor matters to you, and overwinter your best plants rather than starting from seed every year. Tell me in the comments what zone you garden in and whether you have ever tried overwintering a pepper plant. I read every one. Next video is about pineapple picking, the one sign that tells you whether a pineapple is sweet before you cut it open. The color tells you almost nothing. I have tested this across dozens of pineapples over the years. I have not bought a disappointing one since I understood what to look for. That video is next. Subscribe. The button is right there. The knowledge is free.